U.S. President Joe Biden on Monday criticized the day's Supreme Court ruling on presidential immunity, which has largely been seen as a win for his election rival, former President Donald Trump.
This nation was founded on the principle that there are no kings in America. Each of us is equal before the law.
In calm, measured remarks from the White House, Biden said the ruling set a, quote, dangerous precedent.
For all practical purposes, today's decision almost certainly means that there are virtually no limits on what a president can do. This is a fundamentally new principle, and it's a dangerous precedent, because the power of the office will no longer be constrained by the law, even including the Supreme Court of the United States. The only limits will be self-imposed by the president alone.
The U.S. Supreme Court found on Monday in a 6-3 ruling that Trump cannot be prosecuted for any actions that were within his constitutional powers as president, but can be for private acts. It's a landmark ruling recognizing for the first time any form of presidential immunity from prosecution, but stops short of allowing absolute immunity for all official acts, as Trump's lawyers advocated. The decision means it's unlikely Trump will be tried before the election on charges brought by special counsel Jack Smith over his efforts to undo his 2020 election loss to Joe Biden, one of 4 criminal cases Trump has faced. On Monday, Biden said the public has a right to know the results of that prosecution before November's election.
Now, because of today's decision, that is highly, highly unlikely. It's a terrible disservice to the people of this nation.
Biden's remarks were also his first from the White House since his shaky debate against Trump last week, which led to calls for the 81-year-old to withdraw from the race. After stumbling over his words at the Atlanta debate, Biden is being closely scrutinized for signs that he is up to the job of running for re-election and of governing the country for 4 more years.
Following appointments to the executive.
South African President Cyril Ramaphosa has announced his new coalition cabinet, including a job for the leader of what was the largest opposition party, the Democratic Alliance.
The Minister of Agriculture is John Steenhuisen.
Hello, how are you doing?
Ramaphosa's African National Congress was forced to join with rival parties to stay in power after losing its parliamentary majority for the first time in 3 decades in a May 29th election. And Sunday's announcement has followed weeks of protracted and at times acrimonious negotiations. Political analyst and former South African diplomat Melanie Verwoerd said what had emerged was a major shake-up with very few of the old faces still in there.
Like John Steenhuisen in agriculture, I don't know what he knows about agriculture apart from that you buy chickens in supermarkets. But I do understand why the DA fought for that. I think it's because they want to get some of the Freedom Front voters. That's one of the few growth points still for the DA.
Freedom Front is a smaller party with its base in white Afrikaans-speaking voters. The markets, which had welcomed inclusion of the business-friendly DA in South Africa's coalition government, responded favourably to the new cabinet. South African assets rose sharply on Monday. Some investors, however, said the gains were likely short-lived, as it would take time for the new government's agenda and performance to become clear. The reaction on the streets of Johannesburg was more mixed. While some welcomed the diverse and inclusive makeup of the executive, others, like Gomalema Utemeleng, questioned the mix of different people with different philosophies.
I'm not really confident about it, but then they say the people of South Africa have spoken. Is that what they say they wanted? That's my question. I don't really support it fully, but hey, what can we do? Because at this point, I feel like we've spoken, but we're not being listened to.
Alongside the DA, Ramaphosa has made space for 5 other coalition parties in his cabinet. But now that the wrangling over portfolios is over, the government faces the more daunting task of governing. That's in the face of a struggling economy, crumbling roads and power stations, and high unemployment. Whether the coalition of former enemies can improve on the ANC's record may depend, analysts have said, on the extent to which they can set aside their ideological differences.
The U.S. Supreme Court on Monday ruled that presidents have, quote, absolute immunity from criminal prosecution over what the justices said were, quote, official acts. in a critical case over whether Donald Trump can be charged for allegedly plotting to overturn the results of the 2020 election. The landmark ruling recognizes, for the first time ever, any form of presidential immunity from prosecution. The 6-3 decision, written by Chief Justice John Roberts, split down partisan lines and threw out a lower court's decision rejecting Trump's claims of immunity from criminal charges. It ordered the lower court to evaluate which of the alleged crimes in the indictment were, quote, official and therefore immune from prosecution, and which were, quote, unofficial and potentially criminal. The Supreme Court's slow handling of the immunity case has already helped Trump by making it unlikely that any trial on charges brought by special counsel Jack Smith could be completed before the 2024 election.
Today, an indictment was unsealed, charging Donald J. Trump with conspiring to defraud the United States, conspiring to disenfranchise voters, and conspiring and attempting to obstruct an official proceeding.
Smith indicted Trump in August of last year. Trump has pleaded not guilty. Trump's actions alleged in the indictment include efforts to fire and replace officials at the Justice Department, pressing Vice President Mike Pence to illegally reject state electoral votes, and working with state officials to concoct fraudulent slates of electors to support him. USA! USA! The special counsel also accused Trump of fueling his supporters' violent efforts to storm the U.S. Capitol on January 6, 2021. But the Supreme Court ruled that a president has, quote, absolute immunity for decisions governing appointments within the executive branch, including at the Justice Department, and that his communications with the vice president and with his supporters could be viewed as official acts. Liberal Justice Sonia Sotomayor excoriated the majority decision in a dissent, writing, quote, today's decision to grant former presidents criminal immunity reshapes the institution of the presidency. It makes a mockery of the principle, foundational to our Constitution and system of government, that no man is above the law. She added that the majority believed Trump should enjoy immunity from prosecution, quote, and so it invents an atextual, ahistorical, and unjustifiable immunity that puts the president above the law. Donald Trump praised the decision, writing on social media, quote, big win for our Constitution and democracy, proud to be an American. The 78-year-old is the first former U.S. president to be criminally prosecuted, as well as the first former president convicted of a crime. President Joe Biden's re-election campaign said in a statement, quote, today's ruling doesn't change the facts, so let's be very clear about what happened on January 6th. Donald Trump snapped after he lost the 2020 election and encouraged a mob to overthrow the results of a free and fair election.
Victims of multiple attacks in Nigeria's Borno state were receiving treatment at this hospital in Maiduguri on Sunday. The day before, suspected female suicide bombers separately attacked a wedding, a funeral, and a hospital in the town of Gwoza, killing at least 18, according to the head of the local state emergency management agency. Barkindo Saidu said the death toll included children, adults, and pregnant women, and that 30 others were injured. No one has claimed responsibility for the attacks. Borno is at the center of a 15-year jihadist insurgency that has killed thousands of people and displaced millions more. Although the Nigerian military has degraded the militants' capabilities, they still carry out attacks against civilians and security targets. Boko Haram and its splinter group Islamic State West Africa Province are the most active militant groups in Borno. Borno State Police were not immediately available for comment.
Strong winds lashed Grenada on Monday as Hurricane Beryl made landfall in the Caribbean, churning into the Windward Islands and threatening devastating flooding and storm surges. The U.S. National Hurricane Center called the Category 4 storm an extremely dangerous and life-threatening situation, as winds from Beryl reached 150 miles per hour, and it dropped up to 10 inches of rain in some areas. Michael Brennan is the Hurricane Center's director.
You can see the very well-defined eye in both visible and infrared satellite imagery. Beryl has re-strengthened this morning as it's gone through an eye wall replacement cycle. So now is when we're experiencing those catastrophic Category 4 wind conditions in portions of the Grenadines, places like Union Island, Palm Island, Petite Martinique, Petite St. Vincent, Carriacou.
The appearance of a major hurricane this early in the Atlantic hurricane season is rare. So is the quick strengthening of this storm, according to Christopher Rozoff, an atmospheric scientist at the National Center for Atmospheric Research.
It had a very intense shift in intensity from a Category 1 to Category 4 storm in less than 24 hours, making it one of the most impressive rapid intensification cases in Atlantic history. And we honestly have not seen any recorded storms perform such an intensification rate prior to September 1st in the history books. So for a storm to do this in late June is something we have not seen before.
The Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines said he was expecting a natural disaster that could continue for days. Beryl is expected to continue thrashing the region throughout the week.
These are the chances of hurricane-force winds. We're most concerned about downstream, about seeing hurricane-force winds in Jamaica, and a hurricane watch has been issued for that island as of this morning. There is a potential for Beryl to remain a hurricane, a powerful hurricane across the Caribbean Sea. There is also a chance of hurricane-force winds extending as far westward as to portions of the Yucatan Peninsula later this week.
The storm is currently moving to the west-northwest at 20 miles per hour.
A car drove into pedestrians near Seoul City Hall on Monday, killing 9 people and injuring at least 4 more, according to police and fire officials. Local broadcaster YTN TV said that the car rammed into pedestrians standing on the crosswalk after hitting 2 other cars. Witness Park Sung-il described what they saw.
Even though people collapsed, the person in the passenger seat was only concerned about the driver and mentioned that there were clothes in the trunk. If only they'd used them to apply pressure quickly to those hit by the car, at least one person could have been saved. That one person probably died.
A police officer was administering CPR to a person on the ground at the site of the accident, according to a video given to Reuters by a witness. Temporary barricades were already up by Tuesday morning after the collision damaged pedestrian guardrails. Cho Hyun-ho runs a store near the site of the crash, and he said he still felt affected by the news.
My daughter called me because I run a store in front of the city hall, so I asked her what the accident was, and I heard it was a big accident. I mean, the car crash happened. This is how I found out. My heart at that time is still breaking.
According to police officials, the exact cause of the accident is still under investigation.
I'm proud of going to prison.
Influential Donald Trump ally Steve Bannon arrived at a Connecticut prison Monday to serve a 4-month sentence for defying a congressional subpoena from the committee that probed the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol in 2021. The right-wing media firebrand spoke to reporters before entering the facility.
I have not only no regrets, I'm actually proud of what I did, and I would have felt terrible if I didn't do it. Yes. I don't mind going to prison today.
The 4-month sentence could keep Bannon imprisoned almost until the November election, when Trump faces President Joe Biden for the White House. In 2022, Bannon was convicted of 2 misdemeanor counts of contempt of Congress. He was charged after he refused to turn over documents or testify to the Democratic-led House of Representatives committee investigating the Capitol riot by Trump supporters. Bannon, who was a key advisor to Trump's 2016 presidential campaign and a former chief White House strategist, is not the first Trump administration official to go to prison for refusing to cooperate with the committee. Peter Navarro, a former Trump trade advisor, reported to prison in March after he too was given a 4-month sentence.
Tell us what you think friends and foes around the world should know about American leadership today under President Biden.
Well, I think what the world knows, the world has experienced over 3.5 years, not one night, is exactly the kind of leadership that he's brought to bear on problems that are common for so many countries, particularly so many of the democracies around the world. And as I've seen it, again, going around the world, there's a desire, there's a thirst for American engagement, for American leadership. Even when we have disagreements with countries, they still want us in this and even leading to try to get to a better place. And they've seen a president who's reinvested America in the world, reinvested in these alliances, in these partnerships, in ways that they seek and want. What I'm seeing, what I'm hearing is, again, people are looking at the last 3.5 years. They're looking at policies. They're looking at policy choices. And for the most part, they like the choices and the policies that this president
Maxims Ringo and Yanis Lox became the first same-sex couple in Latvia to register their partnership on Monday. This landmark moment followed a new law which came into force at midnight. After the event at a legal office in the capital Riga, the couple exchanged silver rings at a party. They said they hoped to get gold rings if and when Latvia legalises same-sex marriage. Locks told Reuters he was happy that the government are recognising that their partnership exists.
I feel excited, kind of emotional about it as well, because it is for us a really big step, and not only for us, for the country itself. And being first, it's all the publicity that comes with it as well. It kind of is a bit, I would say, a bit stressful, but in the same time, I feel happy that we can finally do it.
Homosexuality remains a divisive topic in Latvia. In 2005, legislators changed the constitution to define marriage as only allowed between a man and a woman. But the Latvian parliament voted last November to formally legislate same-sex civil unions. This allowed people in such a partnership to have hospital visiting rights as well as giving some tax and social security benefits. But gay rights activist Kaspars Žalietis says same-sex couples still face some hurdles.
The key things that are still missing are first an inheritance issue. That is a difficult issue to solve as it requires a large legislative changes. Also, nothing is done regarding the recognition of the same-sex couples that have been registered abroad. And obviously there is no issues tackled regarding the children that live in the same-sex families.
He said notary offices are now facing queues of same-sex couples who want to register their relationship as quickly as possible. The change in Latvia means there are now only 5 EU countries where people in same-sex relationships cannot register civil unions: Bulgaria, Lithuania, Poland, Romania and Slovakia.
A menace on 4 hooves plagues the people who live on this remote South Korean island. After dark, it's easier to see that Anma Island's deer outnumber residents 7-1. They chomp on crops and trees in their nocturnal wanderings. Villagers must live behind fences, penned to their homes and fields. The problem is they can't do much about it under South Korean law. Even though they're out of control, the deer are technically considered livestock. Residents are petitioning the government to label the deer as pests so they can cull them. In the meantime, the locals have had it. They've essentially given up their fight against the deer, but not before trying all sorts of ways to deter the horde of herbivores, putting up fences, barbed wire, even playing sounds of gunshots out of speakers. 80-year-old Han Jong-rae works in her vegetable garden, surrounded by a 6-foot-high fence, which did little to stop the animals.
아이고 매 저 막으는 거를 보소. 저렇게 막으라 뚫고 돌아가고 다 먹어버려 다 진당치 못 살겠네. 지발도가 잡아가면 살겠어.
Deer antlers are highly prized in traditional Korean medicine. That's why farmers in the mid-80s first introduced the species to Anma Island. They brought about 10 of them, but dwindling interest in such medicines dried up the antler market. The herd was left unchecked, and numbers exploded to around 1,000, spread over an area a bit bigger than Manhattan's Central Park. Antler trader Kang Dae-rin uses a blowgun to tranquilize a deer. Based near Seoul, he's visited the island several times to gauge its potential as a source of material, but he says it's almost futile to sedate them.
사슴이 많이 지금 서식하고 있고 지금 이게 마취로 여기 포획이 이게 불가능한 수준이에요. 이미 사슴이 면역력이 생겨서 다 도망가고.
Deer on the island also have a severe tick infestation that makes it hard to ship the animals or their antlers away. If the government agrees to reclassify deer on the island as harmful wildlife rather than livestock, village leader Jang Jin-yong says it could clear the way for hunters to help thin the numbers.
여기서 뭐 포수가 와갖고 총으로 잡는다는 것도 좀 그런데 어찌됐건 간에 뭐 저희한테는 좀 사슴한테는 좀 미안한 얘기지만 일단 저희는 뭐 사슴을 죽어서라도 다 이제 퇴치하는 게 저희 목적이 안 봐도 주민들의 목적이기 때문에.
this six-legged robot replace real guide dogs? Its developers in China think so, and hope the robot dog could one day help vision-impaired people live a more independent life. The robot is currently being field tested by the research team at Jiaotong University in Shanghai. It's able to navigate its physical environment via cameras and sensors. It can also plan routes and recognize traffic light signals, which traditional guide dogs are unable to do. Visually impaired couple Li Fei and Zhu Zibin are helping to test the robot. They communicate with it via artificial intelligence technology.
现在呢，我通过语音对话，然后告诉他我要去哪里。控制它的速度是用，就是我拉着这根盲棍，然后如果我需要它快一点，我只要往前一直推它；如果需要它减速的话，我只要把手往回带，拉一拉，它就会调整速度。
Robot guide dogs are under development in other countries, but China has a drastic shortage of traditional guide dogs. Pet ownership and service animals are also relatively new concepts in the Asian country. Professor Gao Feng leads the research team at Jiaotong University. He says the production of robots can be scaled, especially in a major manufacturing hub like China.
中国呢，一共才说400多只导盲犬在服役，那也就是说我们有将近2000万的盲人，这个是不可能用导盲犬解决这个问题。 那么机器人呢来做呢，就有点像汽车一样的，我可以用汽车的生产方式批量生产，这样呢就会很便宜。
Roaring Kitty has pounced on another stock, sending it on a bumpy ride Monday. Shares of Chewy rose as much as 10% early in the session, before falling more than 6% after a filing showed that Keith Gill, the stock influencer known as Roaring Kitty, had taken a significant stake in the pet products company. Monday's SEC filing included a section that read, quote, "Check the appropriate box to designate whether you are a cat." Under that, an X appeared next to the line, "I am not a cat," words uttered by Gill in front of Congress during the GameStop craze of 2021. Back then, Gill's Roaring Kitty posts about the game equipment company prompted retail investors to send its stock price soaring. Some analysts have said Gill's interest in Chewy could be due to the fact that it was founded by GameStop CEO Ryan Cohen. Gill first tipped his hand about his stake in Chewy last Thursday when he posted an uncaptioned picture of a puppy on social media platform X that briefly sent the company's shares to a near one-year high. The filing showed that Gill owns 9 million shares of Chewy, worth about $245 million as of Friday's market close. That would make Gill Chewy's third largest shareholder, according to LSEG data. The SEC, Chewy, and Gill did not immediately respond to requests for comment. Wall Street's main indexes edged higher on Monday, with the Nasdaq notching the biggest gains thanks to mega-cap tech stocks. The Dow ticked up into the green, the S&P 500 added about 0.25%, and the Nasdaq climbed more than 0.8%. Data from the Institute for Supply Management showed manufacturing contracted for a third straight month in June, while prices paid by manufacturers dropped to a 6-month low. Both are encouraging signs for the Federal Reserve's battle against inflation. Also scheduled for this week are JOLTS job openings data on Tuesday and the non-farm payrolls report on Friday. Traders have stuck to their bets of around 2 interest rate cuts from the Fed this year, according to LSEG's FedWatch. But Matt Stuckey, chief portfolio manager for equities at Northwestern Mutual Wealth Management, said he's less optimistic.
We think at this point in the economic cycle, inflation is somewhat sticky, demonstrated by still an elevated wage environment that's not consistent with the Fed's 2% inflation goal. You know, wages need to be somewhere between 3 and 3.5%. The latest update that we've seen for the month of May with the payroll report was that wages are about 4.2% up year on year.
Stocks on the move included Apple, which rose nearly 3%, while Amazon and Microsoft both added more than 2%. Shares of Tesla surged 6% ahead of second quarter vehicle delivery data. JP Morgan Chase shares gained more than 1.5% to hit an all-time high after the biggest U.S. bank on Friday hiked its dividend and the board authorized $30 billion in share buybacks. And shares of Chewy dropped more than 6.5%, reversing sharp early gains after stock influencer Keith Gill, also known as Roaring Kitty, disclosed a 6.6% stake in the pet products retailer.
Nvidia is set to face antitrust charges in France. That's according to Reuters sources with direct knowledge of the matter. If confirmed, it would mark the first action by a national enforcer against the AI chip champion. There was no comment on the report from France's antitrust regulator or the company. However, the sources say Dawn raids last September were targeted at Nvidia and part of a broader probe into cloud computing. Last week, the French watchdog issued a report on competition in AI and cited the risk of abuse by chip providers. It voiced concerns over the sector's dependence on Nvidia software and unease over its recent investments in cloud service providers. Companies risk fines of up to 10% of their global annual turnover if they violate French antitrust rules, though they can offer concessions to stave off penalties. In the US, sources say the Department of Justice is leading investigations into Nvidia. The company is under scrutiny amid its dominance of the market for AI chips, which power systems like ChatGPT.
Kardashians' influence is reportedly decreasing as their businesses face challenges. Kylie Jenner's cosmetics company is struggling amid accusations of financial issues and increased promotional posts. Kendall Jenner's tequila brand 818 is also under scrutiny, while Kourtney Kardashian's wellness brand Poosh faced fraud accusations. Selling properties has sparked questions about the Kardashians' financial status. In March 2024, Kylie Jenner reduced the price of her Beverly Hills home, which she's been trying to sell since 2022. A TikToker suggested Kylie might not be as wealthy as perceived, noting her $80 million in Southern California properties and expenses like mortgage, upkeep, and a $73 million private jet. The mansion bought with Travis Scott for $13.45 million in 2018 was initially listed for $21.9 million, dropping to $17.9 million amid financial scrutiny. Kim Kardashian continues to face criticism for selling her used luxury goods on Kardashian Closet, despite the ethical practice of selling secondhand clothing. Backlash began in 2022 when she sold pricey items like a $700 robe instead of donating them, prompting social media outcry. In May 2024, Kim faced renewed scrutiny for selling a rare Supreme bag for $9,000 while showcasing her $60,000 Tesla Cybertruck, leading fans to accuse her of funding her lavish lifestyle through overpriced sales. Despite criticism, Kim's financial profile remains strong, with significant earnings from ventures like Skims, KKW Beauty, and lucrative social media endorsements. In November 2023, Kendall Jenner spoke with Forbes about 818 Tequila but declined to comment on sales or her stake in the business, fueling speculation about its performance. Critics on Reddit suggested the brand might be underperforming, citing Kendall's non-disclosure as evidence. Some defended her decision, arguing it could be a strategic move in a planned editorial feature like Forbes 30 Under 30. They speculated Kendall might not hold significant stakes in the company, or that its financial metrics might not compare favorably with peers on the list.
Climate change doesn't affect everyone equally. there are some populations, some people that are more vulnerable, and pregnant women, newborns, postpartum women are definitely more affected by climate. We see in the summer months, we see a real increase in low birth weight babies. We see preterm birth. We definitely see an increase in pregnancy losses. There's some summer months where all the babies that are born through our program in these islands are hospitalized for respiratory issues.
कश्ती का जो बहुत मसले होते हैं, धूप में कुछ भी हो यहाँ बैठे रहे, तो बंदे पूरे हो जाएंगे फिर ले जाएंगे, बंदे पूरे नहीं होंगे बैठे रहे, इतनी धूप, बच्चे बीमार हो जाओ, मर कश्तियों में भी मर जाएंगे, उसको परवाह नहीं है।
हॉस्पिटल नहीं है इस क्लिनिक के अलावा, नेहा मैम के अलावा यहाँ पर कोई, जैसे कि कोई नहीं चाहता कि यहाँ कोई हॉस्पिटल हो या क्लिनिक हो या कोई फैसिलिटी हो। पता ये तो है कि यहाँ पर होना चाहिए कि क्यों आप ये क्यों नहीं सोचते कि यहाँ पर एक हॉस्पिटल भी हो। ये तो सबसे बड़ा मसला है आपका कि सबसे आप कितनी मुश्किल होती है आप लोगों को कि आप वहाँ तक जाते हैं। ऐसा क्यों नहीं है कि आप ये सोचें कि यहीं पर एक हॉस्पिटल हो जहाँ पर आपको सारी फैसिलिटी मिले।
Naturia. Yeah? You cannot do that. 掐子了，掐子了，掐子了，
燃烧了，
烧着下来了。咦，看见这它落到哪了？
你往上一看，
顶不上。
玻璃都来了，
这俩玻璃哗都怼来了。